Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books. We are a publishing company that works with authors of all types and genres. So whether you have a book in your head, a book ready to go on your computer, or even hundreds of pieces of paper shoved into a drawer, visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I am so thrilled to be introducing a brand new program we're going to have here at Red Penguin Books. I was so excited to even think that we could have a literary journal, and lo and behold, the first issue of our literary journal, the Red Penguin Review, is going to be coming out in October. So I've asked our editor, Nika Rose, if she would join me and talk a little bit about the literary journal, the types of submissions we're looking for, and how she even dreamt this up, because I was beyond excited when she came to me with this. So welcome, Nika.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me.
Of course.
Thanks for having such a creative thing. I mean, did you see me? You could have knocked me over with a feather when you said the word literary journal to me.
Well, I'm glad.
You did, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about you, just so that everyone can meet you and what you do and who you've done it with. Boy, that sounded a little smutty, but I think you knew what I meant.
No, so I just graduated from Marymount Manhattan College with a degree in directing. But during my time there, I kind of realized that I was more interested in the literary side of theater. And for the last couple of years, I've been working with a number of independent theater companies and theater agencies in New York City, kind of getting a feel for what the literary landscape is like on the theatrical end of things. And now post-grad, I'm working for a Penguin and kind of feeling that out for what that means for books, as well as starting to integrate a little bit more dramatic literature into the Red Penguin landscape. So I'm excited for that.
I am totally excited to have some dramatic literature with the Red Penguin landscape, that's for sure. And it's like the universe knew that you were here, because all of a sudden I got people sending in play scripts. And I told you that, it was so funny. It had never happened before. And in 1 week, suddenly I had about 2 or 3 people say, you know, I was thinking about a play. And I said, are you kidding? We actually have a dramatic literary artist here now. So I'm telling you, the cosmos aligned.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the perfect time to be thinking about plays as not just performances, but literature, because we can't perform right now. So I think it's a great time for people to be looking to publish plays so people can still read their words and get a feel for what they're about when you can't go see a live theater performance. So I think it's going to be exciting to get that in the mix and have people that don't necessarily see theater as often be able to read the words of some really talented playwrights in New York. So
could you give us a little bit of a hint into how to read a play? Because I know the literary journal is not going to be all plays. It's going to have poetry and short stories and such. But I feel like a lot of people know how to approach a short story. And maybe even, well, I don't know that we all know how to approach a poem, but we're going to work on that. But how about a play? Do we read a play differently, whether it's a monologue or a couple of people? Can you give us a little insight?
yeah, and that's a great question. And I think it depends on the style. I think it changes from playwright to playwright pretty drastically in some cases, because some playwrights, write a lot of stage direction, and it is kind of in a way a story. They're giving you all the stuff that you would get in a book. But some playwrights kind of just go dialogue heavy. And I think that's really exciting because you can kind of make reading it your own. And it gives you a lot more room for imagination, because a lot of times, in novels and short stories, they're giving you not only the external life, like what it looks like, but also the internal life of the character. And in a play, you don't really get that. So you can put yourselves more in the shoes and be like, oh, so I'm not getting the internal life of this character. How would I approach the situation? Why do I think this person's acting this way, etc.? And then we're probably going to get a little bit more experimental work. And in that, my best suggestion is to just let it take you where it takes you. And you don't always have to understand. I've been to plenty of performances where I leave being like, I don't know what just happened, but I liked it and it made me feel good. I'm not sure if I could give you a debriefing of what I think the intellectual discourse is, but it was an exciting experience. So I think just be playful with it, and that's the best way to go about it.
Great advice. Be playful. I think so often we think I must understand this. But, you're a professional and we're supposed to just be playful. That's not
It's
easy.
fun. It's reading. It's not, it doesn't have to be so serious. And even when it is like academic theater, at the end of the day, we're telling stories. It's not the rocket science. It's not life or death. We're just having a good time. So
All for having a good time reading. You know that. Absolutely. So now you've gotten a little hint in that the Literary Journal is going to have some dramatic works. But tell us a little bit more about what else is going to be in there, Nika.
yeah, so there's going to be a few more kind of magazine-ish elements, which is going to be an interview every month that's either with some kind of author or with someone that's a publishing insider, perhaps an agent or a publisher or someone who might have some further insights for younger or emerging authors that are looking for a little bit of guidance, as well as a wonderful article from you that will be on some kind of special topic in publishing a month. So hopefully the magazines will build on each other. So maybe the first month we'll learn something about book marketing and continue on and on and on. So hopefully if you get all the copies, you'll have kind of an anthology of publishing material to learn from. And then hopefully the vast majority of it is going to be submissions. And we're going to have a themed section. So like for the October one, there'll be a horror like section, but then there's also going to be still just anything that people want to submit. So I'm hoping that there'll be a dramatic literature section and poems, short stories, and a little bit of everything so that people can kind of get a taste of what all different kinds of authors are doing right now during this time.
Fantastic. And I think because we're all locked up, we're doing a lot of writing. Isn't that what we're doing?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the hope. And when you came to me with the thought of us having a literary journal, it was to celebrate the short form, because so often people think I need 200 pages to publish, or 70,000 words. Tell us a little bit about how short are we going here?
Yeah, I mean, I have no minimum. If you want to send me 10 words and it's an exciting sentence, like, great. I think that's exciting, especially because, again, you're totally right. It gets overwhelming when you think, oh, I have this really great scene or this really great 10-page story and I don't know where to go with it. And maybe I want to expand it, but maybe I don't. But I think this could be a really good like tasting ground to see if they want to expand it, to see what the reaction might be, or if it excites them as much as they think it does to publish it, and think, okay, maybe I'll just move on to the next one, and that publishing it in the magazine was enough for me, or maybe that was actually really exciting. I want to expand on that now and see what happens. So either way, I think it's a great opportunity. I know personally I have tons of stuff that's pretty short form that I just think it's done. Like there's nothing else for me to do with it. And I'd love for people to read it. So I think that's a good opportunity for if you have one poem that doesn't really fit in with the rest of your collection, you're maybe thinking about publishing, this is somewhere to let that work shine.
I love that, because we can't all, think in terms of major works. We might have a whole, folder full of snippets and things. And that gives writers a whole lot more freedom to say, you know what, I'd like to try this form just in a little blurb. Someone mentioned to me, you said the October issue, and someone mentioned that they have like 1-paragraph horror stories. I thought, my God, you can scare me in 1 paragraph? I love that, because where else would you put that?
Yeah, exactly. And I know our kind of headline is that the literary magazine is dedicated to the emerging author. But what I also mean by that is authors that are already established who are looking to maybe jump out of the box in genre a little bit, or looking to experiment with something that they might not be comfortable publishing in long form right now. And I think it's a really exciting place to kind of experiment with re-emerging as maybe a different kind of author, either in genre, in form, or just to play, just to have fun. I mean, again, we're all sitting around at home right now, and us creatives are looking for an outlet, whether that's, we don't usually write poetry and we're deciding to try poetry, even though it's maybe not the best thing we've ever written. It's a good place to just kind of celebrate each other's work, and it's not super high stakes, it's just a page of something, maybe or longer, but hey.
I hit one of my favorite words there, which is celebrate, because I am all about celebrating writers. And I'm so glad you mentioned that about that our tagline is for emerging authors. I mean, aren't we all emerging until we're, maybe J.K. Rowling with billions? I guess we're all emerging. But I did get several calls as soon as we'd started advertising from some published authors who said, does that mean I can't submit? No, 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 no. We would love, love, love to have your submissions. Please, we're here to encourage, but that doesn't mean that there's like a wall. And some people had even asked about submitting excerpts, that it might be, a short story within a novel. And I think that that's a great way to even shine more attention on the original book in some cases.
No, exactly. And the word emerging, we talk about this a lot in the theater literary landscape. It's a very confusing word and it means a lot of different things. And plenty of like playwrights that have had multiple plays up in New York are still considered quote unquote emerging and some don't. So it really, if you have something to submit that you think is interesting, go ahead and submit.
Yeah. That's why I said, I mean, maybe if you've already won the Pulitzer.
Yeah. Then you're probably not submitting to this anyways. But if you are, hey.
Welcome to submit. Now, do we have a word limit? What's our deadline? I don't know if you know all those particulars offhand.
Yes, I do. So the deadline right now is October, I believe it's October 9th. But obviously the sooner the better, just so that we can get stuff in. But if you have stuff, or if you're interested in like writing something new, I totally think that's a wonderful thing to do. If you're like, oh, actually I do want to explore and play, I'm going to write something new, I don't want to just recycle something. I'm up to taking it until then. And I'm saying 1,500 words, but if it's a little bit over that, it's not a big deal. Just try to keep it limited.
Because we are celebrating the short form. So
yeah, exactly.
Short form. We don't want to suddenly have a 70,000 word excerpt.
Yeah. Oh, but I will say, actually though, I'm encouraging people to submit up to 5 pieces.
Okay.
That are under 1,500 words, and they may not all be published by any means, but at least then that gives me a greater sense of what I could work with. So they have multiple things that they can't decide between. Go ahead and just submit them all.
Right. No, that makes sense. And you've got to look at what comes in, and you're looking at the whole, because I mean, I don't even know how one edits a literary journal, that you're accepting submissions and then, I'm sure filing things, this is not going to be put in this time, but maybe we can hold it for another thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fitting with the whole theme. I don't mean the theme like just horror, but just the flow, because you're trying to juxtapose certain things, I'm sure, on certain pages. And then also we have to fit them in the journal.
Exactly. But yeah, no, definitely. I'm definitely planning on keeping like a submission base of all the material so that I'll have a not this time folder, and then the next time I can kind of go back in and recycle and see what hasn't been used yet. So go ahead and send whatever you think might be good for the occasion, and then we'll sort it out.
And I'll just mention on a practical note that the quarterly literary journal will be available in digital and in print. We will be distributing it. We're going to have thousands of readers. So if you are interested in advertising as well, it's a terrific advertising opportunity, because there will be thousands of readers of this. And it's one of those things, unlike, a throwaway, that people will want to keep and read and reflect upon and try to figure out that experimental stuff. I'm anxious to hear that experimental stuff when it comes out. One of the things I love when you mentioned to me about the journal is that we are going to have such a range of authors and types. I think it's going to be very eye-opening for all of us.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be very exciting. And I think something that Red Penguin definitely has that I've pushed for in other companies that I've worked for is like the multi-generational aspect, which a lot of people are completely missing. It's very much a game of like, what's your age range, and we're not going to cross over that. And I think that misses a lot of opportunities for both connection, mentorship, and just like understanding of other people's work. So I'm excited to see people of all ages submitting and putting them, next to each other on the page.
I am so glad you said that, because I think the older writers are going to learn so much from the younger ones, and vice versa. And let's put out a literary journal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You could visit redpenguinbooks.com, and there's a submission button right there. And Nika, good luck with this first issue. I can't wait to have it in my hot little hands.
Thank you.
I am so excited that Red Penguin Books is growing by leaps and bounds. And one of the things we've kind of noticed is that there are a lot of people who want to get their feet wet with something. Maybe they don't want to commit to a whole book, or maybe they've already committed to a whole book and they want to kind of highlight something. So another program we're going to be doing here is called the Red Penguin Collection. The Red Penguin Collection is a very aggressive publishing schedule for anthologies of different genres. Each of these books, and these are the first 3 that will be released. By the way, these will all be released before we even get to Halloween. So it is a very aggressive publishing schedule. Each book is going to have a different genre. You can see here, Reality and a Guide to Growing Up is the first one that's going to be coming out in just a week or so. What Lies Behind is science fiction. A Trip for the Books is travel, and there are going to be so many more with all different styles of writing in that particular theme or genre. So please welcome the editor of the Red Penguin Collection, J.K. Larkin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, except that your little sign says Nika Rose on it.
It does. I happen to be in your other editor's apartment right now.
I was going to say you don't look like a Nika Rose, but that's okay.
Oh, well.
So tell me, what inspired you to think up the Red Penguin Collection?
Absolutely. Well, I have always been a big fan of short form. In high school, I coached, or after high school, I coached the speech and debate team that I competed for in high school, and they would always do 10-minute excerpts of prose pieces, of poems, of short stories, of plays. And I was always so used to working in that form that when I wrote my first 2 books that are both out now, published by Red Penguin Books, Not Kidding and Side Street, both of them were, in a sense, anthology series. Each of them one was an essay collection, one was longer form poems. And because I was so familiarized with that, I got thinking to myself, well, I'm a writer, yet I'm not a person who sees themselves necessarily writing, 30, 40,000 words of a consistent story. Sometimes people are digesting things in more of a soundbite form. So why not diversify our portfolio and have a whole slew of people that are all working in the same genre with the same size of work that are allowing themselves to be limited in word count so that they're not working themselves to the bone.
And what is the limit on the word count?
Our limit is 5,000 words. So unlike the literary magazine, we're a little bit longer, a lot more for authors who are not going for that magazine length, but it's another option for people who write in a shorter form.
Right. That sounds terrific. And what you said is so true. I mean, not only does not everyone want to commit to something so long, but ever since this was announced, I've had authors who often do write in those longer forms say to me, oh, I have files filled with things. Love that there are people with files filled with snippets and excerpts and things that they were kind of trying on for size. And this is a great place to try them on for size.
There we go.
Now, what made you think up these? We have 3 genres that we're starting with. What are some of the other ones that are coming up, and what inspired them?
Well, these first 3, and because this is, as you said, such an aggressive publishing schedule that I'm trying to stick us to, I'm trying to time it so that each book is coming out around the same time that it would be most applicable for people to be reading it. So, for example, Reality, which has submissions closed now and is being published in the next week or so, is a back-to-school edition. Basically, it's regarding teenagers. People are going back to high school and grade school in the midst of this world turmoil, and it gives them an opportunity to read experiences from home. Then we have the sci-fi fiction stories and the travel books, 2 other genres of book that don't necessarily correlate with world events. But right after that, we have our first horror book that will be coming out. That's short form horror fiction. We're going to have an essay collection for New Year's that's celebrating the triumphantness that was surviving what 2020 was. And really, it is about trying to get the genre books to correlate with holidays like that, to diversify what Red Penguin Books is publishing altogether.
I think that's great. And you're right. There are people who might be writing mysteries, and I know them as a mystery writer or a romance writer, and they suddenly say, I've got this horror thing, or I've always wanted to try something like that, and it's a great place to put it. So what are we talking about? Short stories, or are we talking about other forms as well?
Well, I am just about finished with edits on Reality right now, and there are poems in there, there's short stories, there's essays, there's even a play in there. There is a play in there. We're taking everything in for what we're publishing, and what I'm really looking for these anthologies is what I've always seen growing up, is that an anthology series would be not only pieces that are all of the same genre, but all authors that come from a similar background who write in a similar style. That's not what we're about here. I really want to make sure that we're diversifying that so that there could be a 21-year-old college graduate writing a play about their college experience next to a 75-year-old woman who's writing about her childhood in the 1950s. Having those two pieces next to each other really gives a broader spectrum as to what being a teenager could be about. Same thing for science fiction, same thing for romance. It means something different to everyone, so why not include it all?
Fantastic. And you mentioned that we're going to have poetry in there, and I know that you've released 2 books of your own that are very poetry heavy in some places. So can you speak a little bit about how to read poetry? Because I feel like we know how to read a short story, we know how to read an excerpt, but not all of us really know how to approach a poem for the first time.
Absolutely. To me, from what I've seen of poetry, there's a broad spectrum of it. There's poetry that probably looks more classical to people, maybe has some type of pentameter attached, a rhyme scheme, and what it is very lyrical in nature. It might be about nature, it could be about love, it could be about a broader concept and emotion that one is feeling. Poetry that I write is very different than that. It's aggressive, it's slam poetry, it really is in your face. But the consistent thing that I've noticed in poetry, and good poetry that people enjoy reading, is the attention to language. In longer forms of literature, it's really about the narrative, whereas with poetry, I think what you're looking for to digest it is how that language applies to you, the meaning that that author intended with that word, and how you can relate that word, that use of language, that phrase, to your own experience. It's less about how that story can move you, but more about how that language can relate to you.
Wow. Okay. I never really thought about it that way. So poetry is like art with words as opposed.
Absolutely. 100%. I think poetry, especially in the last 60 years or so, has become a very visual medium as well. And that's a really big thing we're trying to celebrate with the formatting of the words. It's not just what they're saying, not just how they're saying it, but also what it looks like on the page and how that translates to both those questions.
Fantastic. So any of you who want to get a little bit brave, and maybe even if you've been writing prose before, give it a whirl. Let me ask you a question about poetry. Does it always have to rhyme?
Absolutely not. I think I've written a singular poem out of hundreds that has rhymed.
Really? Okay, so the rhyming thing is not.
No. If you listen to a musical right now, do the lyrics always rhyme? Absolutely not. Shakespeare didn't even rhyme all the time. So why should we be limiting ourselves to that? To be or not to be? That is the question. I don't hear a rhyme.
I think you're right. You're right. Okay, I didn't think about that as a poem, but I guess all of Shakespeare is poetry.
All Shakespeare's poetry.
Wasn't even on that wavelength. So if Shakespeare would like to submit, we are welcome for submissions from Shakespeare. So we have 2 of these anthologies coming out, I believe, every single month.
Yep, 2 a month. We're trying to stick to 1 publication in the middle of each month and 1 on the last day, so that so long as you keep updated on our Red Penguin Books website, you'll be seeing a new post every 2 weeks of a new anthology that you could submit to.
Okay. And I know that you'd mentioned that you were going to kind of stagger them as far as some seem like they were, and I think you wrote this on the website, creative nonfiction as opposed to fiction and things like that. Do you want to speak a bit about that?
Sure. Some of the books are more based on specific genres. For example, Reality, and the idea of the teenage experience, is something more specific than something like science fiction, horror. That's really more of a mood, a temperature, a genre for a book. When I have a more specific topic like that, I'm trying to include as much as possible. Like I said, we have some creative nonfiction essays in it. We have some plays. We have some poetry, What I'm looking for with certain things like the creative nonfiction, if we're going to release an essay collection about surviving the new year, I think that what people really want to be reading about is how did this 13-year-old do it versus how did this 80-year-old do it? 2020 was a hard year. So how do we get those very personal experiences to be in the collection? some books I'm really pushing for that, and other ones I'd love to see how other people can break form in whatever way they can.
Okay. And I'm personally hoping that the horror book is fiction.
Yes, we
I'm
are hoping the horror book is fiction.
my personal preference. My personal preference that it is fiction. Okay, so we can go to the redpenguinbooks.com website and we'll be seeing lots of things. The books that are coming up, the books that are past, because those will start getting published starting next week.
Absolutely.
Well, good luck weeding through all of those submissions. I know that you've got tons, and like our literary journal, you'll end up with a huge file of things that you might not work with this particular anthology, but can maybe get saved for another time.
Believe me, I already do, and I please everyone submit as much as you can. Just because it's not in this one doesn't mean it won't be in the next one.
That sounds terrific. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think there comes a time in everyone's life that you wake up one day and realize that you are not the youngest person in the room any longer. And I think I've always kind of loved being that youngest person in the room. But I really want Red Penguin Books to have a range, and I'm no longer that range. So I realized I'm going younger. I wanted to go younger for a lot of reasons. One, so that my older authors, including myself, get the benefit of the experience and the vision from younger writers. There's so much to learn, and the greatest way to do it is to let's get our works right there juxtaposed on the same page so we can learn together. So two of our most recent hires at Red Penguin Books, Nika Rose and J.K. Larkin, recent college graduates in the field of theater, but both of them very, very active as writers and in the literary world. So Nika and J.K., thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
I wanted to speak a little bit about you both as writers, if you don't mind. I know JK has released several books, poetry, essays, things like that. Nika writes a lot in the, I'll call it experimental dramatic form. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair word for it.
Word. I love that. Well, Nika, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you write, what you love to write, and kind of why?
Sure. I like to refer to what I write as play-like things because they're not exactly plays in the fact that a lot of the times they're so fantastical in some ways that they're very difficult to actually put on stage. So they really do function more as dramatic literature rather than performative pieces necessarily. But they do take a lot from the fact that my background's in theater. So the form is a little bit more dramatic than maybe a typical short story or novel. So the structuring is kind of like play. There's not a lot of dialogue. I write, if anyone is familiar like with the way that plays are structured, I write pretty much just in stage directions, with maybe like between 5 to 15 lines of text in a 30-page play. So they're very based on movement and like the viscerality of the human form. I talk a lot about like the breath and the body and how it functions in an environment. Again, not necessarily literally, because sometimes the things I'm writing are not quite able to be put on stage, at least for my budget, in our current world. But yeah, I find that for me, I am a big thinker and lover of psychology, so I have to process it in another way too, because in my own life, I'm already kind of doing the autobiographical work. So for me, I have to take it a step further and kind of take those same things that I'm dealing with and abstract them one step up. And that helps me look a little deeper. So that's I think why I write like that.
You have no idea how much freedom you just gave to a whole lot of writers out there. I just was loving every word you said, because, you know, so often I think that we make rules and we put ourselves in a box and people think, well, I can't really write a play because no one's going to act it out, or I don't really like doing dialogue, but I'm not really feeling comfortable writing a novel or something because I'm really kind of thinking, and you just gave a whole lot of people a huge green light.
Yeah, and I mean, it took me a long time to get there. I definitely, for like my whole life, I've kind of thought I was a writer, kind of considered myself a writer, but I never really finished anything. So I was like, I can't in good faith really call myself a writer. And it's because I never felt, I would try to write in all these forms that people have created as the forms I'm supposed to write in, and I didn't understand them for myself, and it didn't feel true to me. So I had a mentor that really just kind of gave me the green light to be like, hey, just do what you do and I'll give you some advice, but at the end of the day, like, it's really a catharsis for you, and also, you know, obviously an expression of your own personal creativity. And I think I started excelling a lot more with my writing once I really honed in on my own very particular voice. And there really is not a lot of other people that write in the exact same form that I do. And I think that's one of the things that helps me in terms of people understanding my work as something new and unique, and people that know me know it's very, very me. So yeah.
Fantastic. And what you just said about being true to your own voice. You know, you were trying to put yourself into a box over here or over here. And I'm so grateful that you had a mentor who took you out of that. And now just by speaking, you are mentoring other people, because I'm telling you, you're giving like a huge green flag. Do it, do it, do it. You know, will we get to read some of your own works in the journals and things coming up?
We'll see. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about challenge. If I did do that, I think I would challenge myself to write something new, probably, because I think it's a little bit of a cop out to like pick things that I don't have a ton of. I don't have a huge catalog. I have like 3 or 4 things that I consider like done. And I think I'd be doing myself a little bit of a disservice by just throwing that in there. So, but we'll see. Stay tuned.
You for the challenge. Now, JK, as opposed to experimental play-like things, tell us a little bit about your writing.
Well, it's very interesting because as much as I absolutely celebrate what she does, I think that what I do is almost the antithesis of that. You know, a couple of years back, I was in therapy and I didn't know quite how to process my experiences, my emotions, as well as I possibly could. So my therapist says to me, maybe you should journal. Maybe you should write down what you want to talk about and then bring it in. And through this journaling medium, a medium that all of us are quite familiar with, I started to realize that it was through this catharsis of sharing my experiences that I really started celebrating my own words more, the power of my voice, whatever that means. So my first book, my second book, a lot of the other stuff that I've written that hasn't been published, a lot of what I do really is sticking directly to some form, whether that be poetry that people are very familiar with a rhyme scheme, whether that be a song, a journal entry, a very standard short story, and applying my own very personal, very direct experiences to that in order to provide visibility for people so that they can see that their life and their experiences are worth that value, are worth sharing with the world. So I think that's really where I get a lot of my stuff from. When you apply that form that people have standardized already and allow your experiences to bleed through into that form, what you're really saying to the world is that this form is worthy of your experiences, and your experiences are worthy of being valued at the same level as any person who has participated in that form before.
Fantastic. And, you know, I love that you started this with journaling. You know, so often writing teachers say, if you want to write, you should keep a journal. And I've never been able to do that myself. But I love hearing when it was a successful venture and that keeping a journal actually brought you further. And like you both use the word cathartic. And while JK, you talk about your writing as, I'll say realism, and Nika, you described yours as, we cannot put this on the stage because it's so fantastical. Yet you both use the word catharsis, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I know. I think people would probably read things that I write and be confused on how it could be a catharsis, because it seems like, oh, this clearly didn't happen to you because this doesn't happen. But I see it as like all of the characters are very much in a severe abstraction of myself and like deep themes in my life that I can't quite express to their full gravity in normal words, because the weight just doesn't seem right to me. So I have to figure out some way to theatricalize those feelings so that it feels like they're as big as they feel like to me. So that's kind of like where I come from with that. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think when I think of the catharsis element of it, it's almost very much like that. It's so much so a part of myself that I can't express adequately with enough words. There are not enough words in the world to possibly say what I am feeling. So instead, say exactly what it is. put it at face value, share the experience. And when I expect what I expect my readers to be thinking when they read my work is, this can't possibly be something that this person has gone through. How could this possibly be true? And to me, that is how they match that gravity. I think the fantastical element is one great way to match their gravity, and autobiographical work is another one. I think people don't necessarily process empathy in the way that they could be, but through reading empathy, they're forced to sit with someone else's words and experiences and take them at face value.
Now, you both gave everyone a big green light because, they say you should write what you know. And sometimes people think, well, that just means writing a strict story of my life. And that's not true. That's not true at all. And writing from yourself, which both of you are obviously doing, could be at either end of this huge spectrum. Your works are so completely different, yet for both of you, you are writing what you know because you are writing of yourselves.
Absolutely.
That's just a huge gift to people, because so many people, I constantly cite the statistic that 90% of the population wants to write a book. 90%. And that's huge. And I know that's true because every time I walk into a room and someone introduces me as a book publisher, I am surrounded by people who say, oh, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. So we obviously have this human yearning to pour ourselves out on a page. And you're both speaking of your very human experiences, but yet in very, very different ways, different forms, different everything. We don't have to put things into a box.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What would you say to somebody who falls into that 90%, who wants to write and wants to get started? Can you give us some hints as to how to get started?
Well, the first thing I would say is just do it, Nike. I mean, honestly, it could start with something as small as journaling. It could start with reading a lot, but I really think that we took a design class together. That's how we met. And in that design class, our teacher, his first thing out of his mouth was, if you have a blank canvas, you have an infinite amount of possibility. And that is the scariest thing in the world. And the second you put that brush to that blank canvas, your possibilities as to what that canvas is going to look like become infinitely limited. And that is so much more freeing. So I think that the second you type that first word onto a piece of paper or into a screen or whatever you choose to do to write, it's all about getting yourself the courage to write that first one. Because the second it's there, you can't write a different word.
I like that. Nika, tips for writers?
Yeah, I think maybe this is kind of maybe a weird answer to the question, but for me, it was thinking when I was writing it at first, right now, I'm just writing this for me and no one needs to see it. Because then if eventually it becomes that thing that you always wanted it to be and it's time to publish, that's amazing. But I think it's so much weight to sit in front of an empty computer screen and say, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to publish it right now, for someone who's maybe never written a lot before. That's a lot to put on yourself, especially if you're thinking about something not short form, something 200 pages long. I spent many years of my life sitting at a page being like, I'm going to write a play. And I can't write the play, or I write 3 pages and I would get freaked out. And then as soon as I told myself, you know what, this play is for me, no one's ever going to see it, then I could actually write something I was proud of. And then once it was done, then people could see it. So I think just start from there and don't put so much pressure on yourself that it has to be like this amazing, perfect thing, because it's probably not going to be for the first couple months, and eventually you'll get there. So
yes, well, you're green lighting people to try, which is, what was that little song? Put one foot in front of the other, just do it, like you said, JK, and just, give yourself some freedom. We pressure ourselves so much in this world. Absolutely. Before we sign off, I always say that to be a great writer, you should also read. What do you two like to read? Any recommendations?
I have 5 books on the nightstand over here. I'm personally in a kick right now to read some classics. I just picked up Moby Dick for the second time. I haven't read it since 8th grade, and I think that really, as my writing would suggest, sticking to that classic form is a really great way to be inspired by the greats and figure out where you could possibly go from there.
Okay.
yeah, I think I'm a little all over the place, but Andre Simon, who's the author of the Oscar-winning movie Call Me by Your Name, he's picked up a lot of traction since the movie came out, but he actually has quite a few wonderful novels, but also wonderful essay collections that I've been obsessed with recently. They're a little dense, but it excites me. And I've also been very into a lot of authors of like the 60s and 70s recently. I've been reading a lot of Richard Bronigan and like Joan Didion. Very different than what I write, but I think that's like the point. I feel like I like to read stuff that I can't write because it excites me, because I'm like, you know what, this is amazing, and I would never write something like that. So get inspiration that you can't necessarily steal directly from, but inspire you in a different kind of more internal way.
I love that. Okay, well, thank you for the inspiration, for the book recommendations, and for the huge green light. And I hope for all of you out there who are wanting to write the 90% of the population, just do it. Thanks so much, and happy writing.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us tonight on Between the Covers. If you love to read and belong to a book club, please contact me at betweenthecoverstv.com. We would love to host your book club right here on the air. Remotely, of course, in case you don't happen to be nearby. Also, if you're an author yourself and would like to appear as a guest, visit us at betweenthecoverstv.com, and there's a sign-up form there with all of our upcoming filming dates. And if you're a reader who just loves to read, well, then you're probably like me and you have a house full of books that maybe you've loved and read already. We're a proud sponsor of the Book Fairies. They're right here on Long Island, and they collect over 50,000 books every single month. Children's books, grown-up books, test books, whatever it is. Visit thebookfairies.org and find out when they're doing, when they're open for book collections, but they also come to you and will pick up your books if you have a whole lot of them. So thebookfairies.org. Thanks again for joining me here at Between the Covers, and we hope to see you next week. Have a great week.